your Chargers linebacker, Deion Henley, and you're tuning in with Chargers Unleashed.
Welcome to another edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Dan Wolkenstein here with you from the LA Football Network. Today's show, of course, is being brought to you by BetOnline, Aura Athletic Greens, and Rock Solid Sports Memorabilia. If this is your first time tuning into the show, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Dan Wolkenstein, it has been a minute since we have done one of these.
Thank goodness for Sundays and for live shows. Honestly, I love live shows. Welcome to everybody who is in already live early with their cup of Joe cigars, apparently. We're going to try to get to some of these comments right off the bat.
My people, cigars.
Show some love. Before we get to that, folks in the chat, give me an over-under, and I'll pick one of them to use as our over-under today. So crowdsourcing this one on a Sunday morning.
Oh, man.
This is going to be good.
That's risky, Dan.
This is going to be good. But super fun episode today. Obviously, we're going to talk about live Q&A. We're going to go into all the topics and questions that you folks have live in the chat. Also going to talk about some things related to one Kellen Moore and his effect. We'll talk about some outstanding possible free agents and salary cap stuff and what this offense could possibly look like this year. Jake, what is your drink of choice on a Sunday morning?
I think the bourbon that I had last night is still in here. So I guess that would be the drink of choice on this fine Sunday morning.
It's still there. It's still there.
It's
Joseph
still there.
Domingo says, Bolt up. A dear friend of the show. My coffee and cigars are ready. Let's go, Bolt fam. Josh says, good morning, fellas and ladies, if there are any here. A bunch of let's goes, obviously. We even got as much as to where people are saying jinx because so many people are saying let's go. Another one, Laus de Bruin. Let's go. Excited for a live show. Lots of energy for Sunday morning. Shout out to Jason. Yes, we're all bringing the energy because, look, we're on the dog days. We're not even a week, a week and a half?
10 days from Chargers training camp officially opening. 10.
We're almost to single digits. We've made it so far. Over under Joseph gives us one. Joseph DiMartini. Over under 40.5 touchdowns by a one Justin Herbert.
Justin Herbert had 25 last year, if memory serves.
He had mid-30s the year prior.
So this is a good one. Looking to add 15 with Kellen Moore as your offensive coordinator, some reinforced weapons. Yeah, what the hell, Dan? Let's go over. I would assume that in moments like this, if Justin Herbert is going to get over 40 touchdowns, he's going to have to be playing Superman at certain points of the time, which isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world, but also isn't necessarily the best thing in the world as far as things that, team and balance and all that type of stuff. But screw it. I'm optimistic. Bourbon's still in here. Let's go over.
Jake's going Super Saiyan, going Superman for Justin Herbert, 40.5. He's pounding the over. Jake, real quick, friends and family, let's talk about our friends over at BetOnline.
Want to just remind everybody that BetOnline remains your number one source for all of your sports betting needs this season. Always the fastest and easiest way to get all of your sports betting info, including live betting options and your favorite casino and card games available to play right from your very own home. All you got to do to get into the action is head on over to the website betonline.ag and use your mobile device to join. And be sure to use that promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV to receive your rewards. BetOnline, where the game starts.
So for folks who are new to the live show atmosphere, this is on you. You are just as much a host as we are, so we rely on you for the topics. If you have no topics, then we are going to roll through ours. If there are still no topics submitted through you, we're done, and we'll have the rest of our Sunday. So in the comments, leave us your topics, questions you'd like us to discuss. Fire them in, and we'll go ahead and try to get to those as quickly as we can, infuse that into the topics we already have in store for you. So, Jake, let's kind of start off this one as a level set. 10 days left of nothingness until we get to training camp.
Pretty much.
And then we've got some outstanding possibilities at maybe running back, maybe safety, maybe corner. Edge, I think, is something a lot of people are looking at as possible free agents to bring in. Chargers have about $12 million in cap space. Do you see that being used on another free agent or more than one? And if so, which position group do you see that going in important or stack rank, if you will?
It's interesting. We've talked about this a few times on the show, Dan. You look at just the overall roster the way it is right now, and I would say two positions jump out to me to where that the Chargers could very much add some much needed depth in terms of the talent that they're looking for. One being tight end. I would specifically say from a blocking scheme, I think you need more help in that regard. So you may go out and add blocking tight end.
You are pounding the table on a free agent tight end.
I'm just look, the Chargers. It felt like the wide receiver conversation last year when everybody expected the Chargers to take a wide receiver and then they didn't. And this year, if you remember Brandon Staley's words, he said that they were trying to get a tight end. The board just didn't fall their way. So to me, that tells me that they were targeting that. And who knows between now and week one, what free agent's going to become available after training camp, down to 53-man cuts. Who knows? I just feel like you could use a little bit more in that circumstance. And then obviously the safety position. Defensive coordinator Derek Ansley has really praised the current layout of this team with Alohi Gilman, talking about the expectations for JT Woods and what they're planning on doing. I still think it may require just a little bit more juice behind that. So safety is another one. And obviously everybody's kind of gone rampant with the John Johnson possibilities. Why hasn't he been signed yet? You saw a little bit of the teases a couple of weeks ago with him working out with some Chargers. But Dan, this kind of all, I think, still maybe rely on Justin Herbert's contract situation and how much of that remaining $12 million may be possibly allocated to that and how the Chargers may structure the deal to work in their favor. Remember, Tom Telesco just does everything very much under the radar, does not want anybody to know exactly when these deals are coming. He did the same thing with Keenan Allen. He did the same thing with Joey Bosa. They kind of just came right out of nowhere and they were right around training camp time. So who knows what's in the works? We would all hope that deal is going to be finalized before the beginning of the season, just so you can get it done. And obviously before Joe Burrow gets his eventual extension, but it'll be interesting. As far as free agents goes, those are the two positions that I could see the Chargers targeting.
Jason has a question here for you, Jake, with what good tight ends are available. Before we get to that question, I think edge is something that I'm hoping the Chargers get to. I'm going to add that position to this. You got guys like Justin Houston, Yannick Ngakoue is still there, Kyle Van Noy, kind of a tweener hybrid, if you will. I think the Chargers, while they have three solid ones, if you think that Tuli's going to be that third infuse of talent behind Mack and Bosa, I think they could use another one. And at this point, you're going to get guys on the cheap relative to what they thought they were going to get. Like Yannick Ngakoue is not going to get the money that folks probably thought he was going to get early on. So could they get him on like a 1-year deal with incentives, or Justin Houston, who I love? I know some of these guys a little older, you're looking for a rental. You're not looking for someone you're going to sign to a multi-year. I think edge could be one that we can add to that position group. Obviously, you got guys like Bryce Callahan still there, still available. We talked about corner safety. I think with what Brandon Staley is looking to do, it seems like they feel confident about the secondary. I don't hear that same confidence come from them around the entirety of the defensive line, specifically edge. So reading between the lines here, I'm adding edge. Jake, what tight ends are available?
That is kind of the crux of this whole thing, is that you're really at a point where you're scraping the bottom of the barrel. And this is why I think that if the Chargers were to do this move, that it will most likely come as we get to, say, right after week 3 of the preseason. And it's literally, we're talking, days before the Chargers' first week 1 appearance, because who knows who's going to be released by then. But when you look at some of the free agent tight ends that are available right now, Dan, we're talking Cameron Brate, Geoff Swain, Mercedes Lewis, Adam Shaheen, Ryan Griffin, Kyle Rudolph. I personally wouldn't mind bringing Steven Anderson back, because
Hold on real quick. Did you say Geoff Swain?
I did say Geoff Swain. I did say Geoff Swain. That's what bourbon does to you on a Sunday morning. Geoff Swain.
Yes.
Geoff Swain. That's how Jake Hefner operates on a Sunday morning.
I love it. So, I mean, none of these guys are like top of the line tight ends, and obviously for good reason. And if you're looking at the Chargers offense, they're not needing a tight end one right now. I think they're needing that like underbelly, like a tight end 2.5, in my opinion, is kind of what they're looking for. And a lot of those guys could fit that bill.
And like I said, Steven Anderson is still available, which I was a huge Steven Anderson fan when he was on this team. And I think he could still bring a lot to this unit as far as where you could place him. He was basically he was a little bit of an HB because he could play tight end. And when the Chargers had him in at halfback and some of the ways that they were utilizing him in the past game, that is a guy who I feel like in terms of a blocking tight end to get a little bit more juice out of him as far as creativity in the passing game goes. I wouldn't mind seeing that reunion at all.
Jake, we got a really big breaking news out of Chargers or pre-Chargers land. Fitness brings this up. Philip Rivers, shout out, had his 10th kid. Will we see Rivers versus Manning versus Breeze versus Brady competition in the future? I mean, my odds are pointing yes. I mean,
that just
the DNA in those
like,
guys.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to think though. It's funny because if you start like arranging this, as far as okay, so like when Rivers and Manning, all those guys, like it was still. If we're talking Eli Manning, Rivers and Eli Manning came in the league at the same time. Brady was already somewhat established. So in this particular circumstance, Rivers' kid's probably going to be the first one that goes to the NFL. And then you kind of have to figure out, okay, based on age, who's going to be and at what point the succession
Rivers,
of the rest of the
Rivers will have like a 15-year window of just kids can keep coming into the league.
Right. I saw a tweet the other day that definitely made me giggle to say that Philip Rivers and Antonio Cromartie can now have an offense and defensive scrimmage between their kids.
Yes.
That one got me.
Yes. And hey, if they have their father's DNA, then they're both going to be pretty good on both sides of the ball. Joseph DiMartini, we got to talk about our friends over at Aura here in a second, but to kind of before that, Joseph DiMartini asked a question. How comfortable do you think the Chargers feel with Alohi Gilman or JT Woods starting? Now, again, comfortable. How comfortable do you think the Chargers feel?
That's a relative word. With
Alohi Gilman or JT Woods starting at free safety. And I think that's two separate conversations, and that's that's internal versus external projections here. Floor is yours.
If you go back and you listen to Derek Ansley's press conference during OTAs and minicamp, he was definitely heaping a lot of praise on Alohi Gilman. Derwin James did this as well, as far as the time that he has put in, obviously the familiarity that he's had with this team for as long as he has been here. I think the Chargers I don't think that they're mincing words. I think that they're actually very confident in the possibilities of Alohi Gilman starting next to Derwin James. And you saw how he stepped up when the Chargers needed him to at certain points of the year last year. Obviously, could have picked up that damn ball that would have negated Tyreek Hill from running that end around all the way to get a touchdown in the Miami game last year, but that's another story. As far as JT Woods goes, I don't see, barring injury, I don't foresee any possibility of JT Woods starting at safety this season. There is still a lot of expectations that are needed from JT Woods. I think he's firmly slotted in as your, safety 3 at this point for however the Chargers are going to use him. They got to get more out of him. Their expectations are high. Didn't see enough of him last year in order to get a good measurement of what he's capable of out there in the field. So I think the training camp is going to be a good indicator of that. I still say that if we're talking today, that Alohi Gilman is going to get the starting nod over him. And we'll see what JT Woods brings to this team this year.
To put it bluntly, I think the team is relatively comfortable with Alohi Gilman starting at safety. I think they've seen enough from him last year. You've heard Derwin James talk about his comfortability and him kind of being that presence and stable guy for this defense on the back end. No way in hell is this team comfortable with JT Woods starting. I wouldn't even know if they're comfortable with him playing, let alone starting. So two different conversations there, two different answers. Jake, real quick, got to pay the bills a little bit more. Let's talk about our friends over at Aura. For folks who did not see this is kind of wild. We had just announced our partnership with Aura, which kind of helps with identity theft, which we'll talk about in a second. And not even an hour into our announcement, folks that are following Chargers Unleashed on Twitter start getting all kinds of DMs from folks who are impersonating Chargers Unleashed. At the time, we were doing a giveaway and was basically saying, hey, you won the giveaway. Send us all your credit card information and we'll send it to you along with your shipping address. And everyone reaches out to Jake and I like, hey, there's another person impersonating you. And they were like multiple. And so you got to be careful with all of your personal information, social address, credit card info. Aura is the perfect company for you. And we actually have a 14-day free trial to give to everyone to kind of help keep their identity safe. We'll be right back in 53 seconds as we hear from our friends over at Aura.
Have you ever Googled yourself and were shocked to see your personal information exposed on one of those public listing sites? Data brokers are making a fortune selling your information to robocallers, spammers, and others who want to learn more about you, like where you live.
We've been trying to reach you concerning your car's extended warranty.
That's why I'm excited to tell you about today's sponsor, Aura. Aura can identify data brokers exposing your info and submit opt-out requests on your behalf, and brokers everywhere are legally required to remove your info if you ask them to, but they make it super hard to do. So let Aura handle that for you. You could try Aura for up to 2 weeks using this link that we're going to put up here on the screen. Aura also does so much more to protect you and your family from online threats that you cannot see. So make sure to check out aura.com/Chargers Unleashed to get a 14-day free trial and see if your personal information has been leaked online.
All right, so Aura.com/Chargers Unleashed. Go ahead, check out your 2-week free trial. Helps us out a ton as well. Shout out to Chargers Unleashed folks who have already done so. Go make sure your identity is safe. Jake, I got a throwback question here from Aether, friend of the show, always giving us some fun questions here. Throwback, 2006 LT MVP season. I still remember that season. Can you convince me the Chargers would not have won the Super Bowl if Justin Herbert was the quarterback that season? Number 17 was the reason we lost to the evil Patriots. Rivers played terrible. Jake, am I wrong?
First of all, if we're just talking about Justin Herbert's the only change that you're making at quarterback, and you're telling me that Marty Schottenheimer is still the coach of this team at this period of time, Justin Herbert probably wouldn't be Justin Herbert because this was in the heydays of Marty Ball. I don't know if we would have seen the same Justin Herbert in that
Still running
circumstance.
it 40 times.
Right. So, and we're talking about, this is back when like Phillip Rivers was just getting his start. So the passing game in general, even at that point in time, wasn't even something that was a big part of the Chargers offense. It was all LT. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if we would have seen the same Justin Herbert with Marty Schottenheimer as the head coach.
I think the game would have been a little bit more interesting. I'll tell you that much. For sure.
I mean, I would just say this. Even if Justin Herbert is the quarterback, I don't think that stops Marlon McCree's situation in that game.
I agree. Yeah, Phillip Rivers isn't playing defense. Okay. So you messed... I don't remember where it is here, but you messed up Geoff Swain.
Yes, I did. Thank you for bringing that up again. Appreciate that.
I'm going to mess this up again. I know he put it in the comments. Oh, okay. So question here came up. I messed up, butchered this guy's name. Good try with the pronunciation, but okay.
See, this is going to be hilarious because now you're going to try to do this again.
Yes, but it says, but Laoise equals Lee Shaw, which how the hell does Laoise pronounce Lee Shaw? Shout out to the Irish folks. I know Irish words and names are hard, but he has a question. Lee Shaw has a question. Do you think just hiring Kellen Moore alone is enough to fix the run game? They haven't had a run game coordinator since Frank Smith in 2021. I say yes. And I said yes immediately when he was hired. You look at what Kellen Moore did in Dallas, and you look at who Tony Pollard was when he was drafted, and I think he was within like 3 or 4 selections of when Isaiah Spiller was drafted. Tony Pollard was not the Tony Pollard we know today when he came into the NFL. Zeke Elliott, Tony Pollard were feasting behind that offensive line. Now, who can be that second running back? I think is the question. Could it be Isaiah Spiller? Could it be someone else? Hell, Ezekiel Elliott's still out there. But scheme-wise, schematic-wise, strategy-wise, Kellen Moore's run game is very different and a way more simplified and efficient run game style than what the Chargers have had here in the past. And not to get too specific, but they kind of have these gap schemes. They have these option schemes where they set up lanes for running backs, and all the running back has to do is go in direction left to right, right to left. Okay, is this lane open? No. Okay, on to the next one. Is this lane open? No. On to the next one. Is this lane open? Yes. Go. Versus before, running backs kind of had to figure it out on the fly. This offense is going to be simplified running game. And that advantage goes to not only the running backs, but also the offensive linemen, because they know what they have to do, and the running backs just get to choose. You saw that play out last year, both positive and negatively for the Chargers and Cowboys. And how many times you saw this offense in the offensive line, while good, the running game was atrocious. And you can blame Austin Eckler for not being a quote-unquote running back, which I disagree with. Isaiah Spiller never even saw him. Sonny Michel, there's some things there. Joshua Kelly could have been better. I do think this running game is going to look much better than it did a year ago or did the years prior.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit more than, pun intended, Kellen Moore in this circumstance. Ooh. But Kellen Moore helped the run game? Absolutely. But getting Rashawn Slater back, let's not forget that he was gone last year. Bringing Zion Johnson to the left side, inserting Jamari Sawyer to the right next to Trey Pipkins. You're not having a revolving door, obviously, of injuries with Trey Pipkins and Foster Sorrell switching sides at the right tackle position. I think in general, the offensive line, as far as a personnel standpoint goes, is going to be better to pair that with Kellen Moore. And Dan, like you mentioned, we didn't see Isaiah Spiller last year. For some reason, Sonny Michel was winning reps during practice and for games last year over Isaiah Spiller, which I still, to this day, baffles me. And the Chargers' run game could have been definitely more efficient. Got to get more out of your RB2 and your RB3 at some point. It's going to be an interesting competition as we head into camp. I still say that Isaiah Spiller, and as it stands probably today, Joshua Kelly is in the RB2 spot. But I would expect Isaiah Spiller to unseat him for that position. And you got to get more out of him and that run game.
Dallas last year, 4.3 yards per carry. The Chargers were 3.7, which that's a pretty big difference. That's more than half a yard per attempt. Look at the total rushing yards per game. Dallas was 9th last year with 131.7. The Chargers, you got to scroll down for miles, 88.4. 88 versus 131. That's like 45 yards difference per game. GS has a question. Over under. Eckler scores 3 game-winning touchdowns this season. Doesn't specify through the air or on the ground, but 3 game-winning touchdowns this season by Austin Eckler.
I don't say it's out of the realm of possibility. How I would like to answer this question is that hopefully the Chargers aren't in a situation to where they're having to come from behind and score a last-minute touchdown. We've seen way too many of those type of games. I don't care who the ball is getting thrown to. I'd like to not be fully stressed out with 15 seconds to go in the fourth quarter of the game. I would like the Chargers to just handle their business. But to answer this question, whether it's on the ground, through the air, I think that's definitely a possibility for him.
I love all of the questions and comments coming in here. This is great. Topics galore. Real UFOs by Keith Chapman says, I predict that the defense for the Chargers are going to be outstanding this season. Outstanding. Now, Jake, last year, I know it looked very different, first half versus second half. But I think the first half and that Jacksonville loss just gave everybody, it kind of clouded everybody's vision. And everyone, if you were to ask everyone, I feel like the majority of people would say the defense sucked. On a 1 to 10 scale, 10 being like tremendous, the Niners, Eagles defense, 1 being like the worst defense you've ever seen. On the whole, where would you put the Chargers defense last year?
Last year?
Including the great end, horrible beginning.
I'll probably put him at mid, Dan, as far as
5-ish.
Put him at a 5, because when you start going through the stats for the Chargers, as far as like even outside of what we saw in the run game and the number of 40-yard rips that opposing offense were getting against this team on a weekly basis, the run defense has been talked about enough as far as how porous it goes. But Dan, I think you brought the stat up a couple of weeks ago. As far as like the pass defense goes and the amount of yards that the Chargers were giving up, but then you see the point differential that they're also giving up, that doesn't make any damn sense at all. They have to get better when it comes to defending the end zone. They have to. And obviously the run game should help in that. Getting JC Jackson back, I think, is going to be a huge boost to this secondary. I think in general, the Chargers are deeper up front with a little bit more of even talent that we're talking about in terms of building out an interior defensive line. I think Tuli Tuipulotu is going to add a lot to this edge group, and your pass rushing is going to be different. Obviously, Joey Bosa being back and virtually seeing him and Khalil Mack for essentially only 2 weeks last year before Joey Bosa goes down was just a huge rob to this team defensively. They just could not generate any type of pass rush. So, and let's not forget Eric Kendricks, what he's going to bring to this team in terms of the run game. I think he's going to pick up the rest of this linebacking group and make them better. So the expectation for this team, I want to still pump the brakes. I'm not ready to say outstanding. I will just simply say improved. If you can get your running game from, what was it, 28th overall in the league last year, 28th, 29th, if you could bring that to the mid-teens, to me, that's improvement. To me, that's serviceable for a playoff run. You can do that.
And I think they'll do that number with the yards per attempt, because they were atrocious. They were dead last at 5.4 yards per attempt given up last year on the ground. If they can get that number down half a yard, if you will, like they were last by a bit. I think that's going to show like how many of those big chunk plays are they giving up, because that's where that 5.4 gets ballooned, is because of that. Real UFOs, this kind of merges into the defensive discussion. I would say like outstanding probably would be like what, like 8, 9 or higher. Like I think the ceiling is certainly up there. We saw what the Rams defense looked like years past. And I think one of the reasons for this kind of below average play a lot of times, especially the first half of the year, was the missed tackles, specifically in the inside of the defense. And I highlighted this last week, I think it was, but the Chargers gave up almost a touchdown more per game in the first half of the season than they did the second half. The first 9 games, they gave up 25.3 points per game. In the last 8, they gave up just 19.5. Again, that's roughly 6 points less per game the defense gave up. Missed tackles, Jake. Through the first 9 games, the team had 89 missed tackles, 59 in the last 8. They improved 30 missed tackles fewer in the second half of the season. Do you know who was the biggest missed tackler in the entire NFL at linebacker? And who's no longer on this team?
I know it, but I'll just let you say it.
Drew Tranquill. And he was by far the largest missed tackler on this team. And if you extrapolate that out, AFC West, I think he had like 10 more than the next closest linebacker in the AFC West in terms of missed tackles.
Extrapolate that a little bit, because Drew Tranquill technically had a lot of possibilities or opportunities to make tackles because the running game was coming right at him, because nobody could stop the run on this team. So
inflection point, if you will. And so it's, your linebacker cannot be missing tackles like that. Like, and look, this is not slamming Drew Tranquill. Like, I think he has a ton of positivity that he brings to this team, he brought to this team.
The linebacker leadership group in general needed a lot of work.
Yes, he was a good pass rusher. Had 5 sacks last year, but I don't think that's what the team needed out of that linebacker position. And Kenneth Murray was much better. So Eric Kendricks is a much more sure tackler. And I think that's what they brought him in for, both in the run and in the pass. And if they can sustain that second half defense, removing the missed tackles, decreasing the points per game allowed, I think they're going to be onto something. Matthew Dahl. I say if we don't go to the AC Championship this year, Brandon Staley and Tom Telesco should be let go next year. So, 2-part question, Jake. What is your line
for success.
And if that line is not met, do you see those two being gone?
Here's where I come to a quandary with this, because you get to the AFC Championship game. Let's not forget, there are not many coaches in this league that would still have a job after blowing a 27-point lead to the Jacksonville Jaguars. So to me right there, that is a little bit of an indicator that if this scenario happens, and we're talking playoff scenarios here, not missing the playoffs, anything like that, getting to the AFC Championship game, I don't believe that Brandon Staley and Tom Telesco would be gone if they reach the AFC Championship game and if they lost. Now, it could always be a surprise, but I base that off of the Chargers basically giving him a pass after blowing a 27-point lead, still keeping Brandon Staley when there was a lot of people that probably would have gotten fired if they were in that position, and he didn't. And now you're going to fire him for getting to the AFC Championship game and losing. I mean, what are we talking about here? A hypothetical where the Chargers just get trounced 40-0 in the AFC Championship game? Or are we talking about a very close competitive game, 28-27, and the Chargers lose? Who knows? But there's still a couple possibilities here, Dan. Let's just say hypothetically Brandon Staley is gone next year. Does Kellen Moore take over the reins? The Chargers would have a very nice in-house replacement, and Kellen Moore has been looked at for head coaching jobs now for the last couple of years.
They have a nice handcuff.
Yes, because if the Chargers offense is doing well, I don't know how long Kellen Moore is going to be on this team as far as the offensive coordinator goes.
I put a six-pack that he's going to be head coach next year somewhere.
And
it could be LA, it could be somewhere else, but he'd be a head coach somewhere.
Yes. So let's count our blessings while we may have Kellen Moore and see what he could do with this offense. And if it's doing well, and if it's in the top 5, you may want to do whatever you can to hold on to Kellen Moore. So who knows what's going to happen in that scenario?
Daniel Bridges. Okay, I'm way behind these comments. Let's kind of go rapid fire here for a sec. Is there any scenario in which Brandon Staley doesn't finish the season?
The worst scenario would probably be, I mean, again, I'm just talking about Kellen Moore. I would think that the Chargers would have to be something like 1-8. And traditionally, this organization does not fire head coaches midseason. Coordinators, yes. Head coaches, no. So you'd have to be telling me the worst case scenario as far as record-wise goes to say, okay, Brandon Staley, we're going to just move on, promote Kellen Moore. That would be a nice little soft beta test, if you will, to then possibly the Chargers hiring Kellen Moore in full time at that point in time. But that is a huge hypothetical, and no, I don't see that happening.
Jorge Rodriguez, do not fear. Athir is here. Again, we're doing a live show. If you have questions, comments, put them in the chat. We'll do our best to kind of get to these. Jake, let's go rapid fire here and continue on. Firing Lombardi was enough to fix the run game, says GS. It seems like a lot of people have this addition by subtraction. Anybody but Lombardi, people feel like is a win for this Chargers offense. Do you agree? Jake pleads the fifth.
You know what the best part about it is? I'm still finding my reasons to come around to talk about the subject of one Joe Lombardi. I feel like I've talked about this ad nauseum. I felt Joe Lombardi had few moments where I gave him a lot of praise. One being the game plan for the Miami game. But just overall, in terms of game plan scenarios, I get it. Injury aspects, that aside, still as a coordinator and a head coach pairing, you have to game plan properly with what you have. Injuries happen, but the good coaches and the good coordinators are able to overcome that and adapt and mold their game plan to something that is going to work for them. Now, I understand football is not just an offensive game, so there's a few things that you can place blame on. But as far as what Joe Lombardi did, more often than not, I just felt could have been done better.
Fair. Joseph asks, if this is considered an all-in season, what's the one move the Chargers need to make to get to the Super Bowl?
Well, I mean, this is weird because we're not talking a free agent acquisition in this scenario. The Chargers don't have the money.
It could be.
But at $12 million and what they have in their cap right now, and then remember all the restructuring that they had to do last year. And we're still talking about getting Justin Herbert under contract. Let's not forget about that. So I'm not sure, because this isn't going to be, this obviously has not been an offseason the way it was last year, when the Chargers just had all the money in the world to spend to go out and get multiple pieces.
But the guys they have left, which the timeline in which we're at now, where we're entering training camp, they have enough dollars in their pocket to where they can go get one of the top guys remaining.
Sure.
Which position group?
We're already talking about the Chargers going 6 deep at wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure who's out there other than DeAndre Hopkins, who's not coming to this team, that you would say would be, oh, that's the all-in move. I don't know. As far as I love this when people talk about, oh yeah, go get Zeke, or in this case, in some of the comments, it's very funny, go get Josh Jacobs. Would you want to piss off Austin Eckler that much more from the standpoint of the scenario that he has already talked about, which from his standpoint, if we're talking the league in terms of running back goes, he is 100% correct in terms of how the league values running backs. Mm-hmm. So you mean to tell me that you're going to go out and sign someone to a 1-year deal that may be more than what Austin Eckler is making this year to add to it? We said this during free agency. It's like, I could not see the Chargers going out and getting a free agent running back just to make Eckler that much more upset, even if he's only playing for this team for one more season. Doesn't matter to me. You know, the John Johnson possibility, that's been teased for months, Dan. I definitely think that would add a lot of juice to see John Johnson and Derwin James playing side by side. So I think if we're talking about it here, when you start going through the offense, and I specifically turn this with Kellen Moore, you have so many possibilities that you could go with this offense in terms of wide receiver, tight end, running back, and you could get some creative juiciness out of your offense. I think it would probably have to be defense, Dan. Whether you go out and you get another edge, as you were talking about, John Johnson possibly being an option at safety, I just don't know who it would possibly be yet. And it may even end up being something that the Chargers, if they're in contention and they want to swing for the fences, that it may end up being something at the trade deadline. Who knows?
I think it's edge. I just look at kind of the impact positions, and if they can, again, like, I think they're an advantage, but they can go get like a Jadeveon Clowney. They can get, again, he's great against the run, and that's, I think, what this team needs. Justin Houston is still productive. You can still get Yannick Ngakoue, and these are on premium positions that impact the game. Like, how often does a safety impact the game versus how often a defensive lineman can impact the game? Because, like, realistically, the quarterback has to throw it near the safety for him to impact the game. The defensive line is there every play. And when you have defensive linemen like Khalil Mack, Sebastian Joseph Day, Joey Bosa, like, I would love to see them have a full rotation where they don't have to play those guys 85% of the time. Now, could they? You saw what happens, and one of them easily get hurt. Now, I'm not blaming Joey Bosa's injury on him playing a lot last year, but if you can have a rotation where all those guys can stay more fresh, can rotate in, be more effective, that's where I'm going. So if it's me answering this question, I'd say defensive end, edge player specifically. Let's get into these. Should we keep 7 wide receivers, asked Pacific Beats, for injury insurance, especially to have Pokey and Guyton? On the active roster, hell no. In practice squad, sure.
Yes. Easy.
Jason asks, is there a realistic chance we pick up Zeke?
I don't see that happening. I
Unless
just
it's
don't
for
see
dirt
that
cheap.
happening. Yeah, it would. And do you see Ezekiel Elliott taking that kind of a pay cut? I don't. And no, and personally, I think that if you would have told me that the Chargers were running Isaiah Spiller last year a lot and not seeing what they would have hoped to have seen out of him, then I could see that as a possibility. I think for the fact that you don't know what he's about, but there's so much potential there and untapped potential because you didn't utilize him last year, I think that the Chargers are banking on him to come in and be an added addition to this running back unit. So I think there's a lot of justified hype for Isaiah Spiller adding contributing to this run game season. I think there's a good dynamic between him, Eckler, and Kelly as far as what you can do, possibly going 3 running backs deep for this unit. So you just give him the reps, and if your offensive line is opening up those holes, I think he's going to be a really valuable piece for this.
Interesting question in the chat going on right now. Do you believe in Jason? Jorge Rodriguez asks, do you guys believe in Staley? Personally, I believe in both Staley and Telesco, he says. Daniel Bridges immediately responds, I don't believe Brandon Staley. He has to show me it's year 3. Jake, all in. Again, this is rapid fire. It's not getting too crazy. Do you believe that Brandon Staley can get the job done? Yes or no?
Both answers are right here, in my opinion, how I perceive it. Do I believe in Brandon Staley? Yes. Do I believe in the way that he connects with his teammates? Yes. Do I believe he has what it takes to be a head coach in this team? Yes. Has he made mistakes? 100% he has made mistakes. So yes, this being year 3 with Justin Herbert at the helm, with this type of an offense, yes. Where is the defense that we were all expected to see when he came over to this team? We need to see that. I think the pairing between him and Derek Ansley is going to improve this defensive unit. So I think
good name to bring up.
I think that, we went through the first year with Brandon Staley and it was all fourth and Staley riding by the seat of our pants, just trusting the analytics at that point in time. And then last year, he kind of pulled it back a little bit. I still think that last year was a little bit of him finding his footing in certain scenarios. And he has definitely taken accountability for any mistakes that he has made. I think year 3, you're going to see that come together. But he needs to put it together. There's no doubt about that. As much confidence as I have in him to do it, he needs to do it, because I get it. It's year 3. You have to improve in a lot of different aspects, and you have to deliver.
Look, at the end of the day, this is a prove it year for most of the coaching staff and front office. Let's just call a spade a spade. Brandon Staley has to succeed this year. Tom Telesco and his team has to succeed this year. Derek Ansley has to succeed this year, or else big changes are going to happen. And that isn't a hyperbole. This is a hot seat for a lot of folks. And it should be when you have a roster like this. It's a top 10 roster easily. And people point at holes, and there are holes. Yes, and there are holes in almost every roster in the NFL. But it's a top 10 roster, and you should play like a top 10 team, period. Questions, let's go in. Darian says, JJ3, please, I plead. Fitness says, I can see it's getting a linebacker or defensive tackle. Jorge says he doesn't see Bosa playing a full season and hopes that he plays just 12 games and is available for the postseason. Again, this is why having a rotation at edge is so important, because like you said, Jake, injuries do happen. Let's see what else we got here. Daniel Bridges says, we do need a safety because the scheme of Brandon Staley's, the safety and slot needs a tackle or we are going to be in trouble again. Agreed. I think there's a big bump. Jake, we talked about earlier of the possible topics for us to go over. Jazir Taylor, there's a lot of faith in him, and you're hearing a lot of praise coming his way. And so, is some of that manufactured? We don't know. But we saw it in glimpses last year. Jazir Taylor looks the part. He's got the size. And could he be the replacement for a Bryce Callahan? I think long-term, I think he has to be. But the slot, nickel, safety position does need a tackle. I agree. And that's why JT Woods has not been on the field much, is because his missed tackle was not good. Jake and I both have said, we've wanted John Johnson from jump. That would be excellent.
It just makes too much sense. It really does.
And right now, it just seems like it's an unnecessary risk to not bring him in when there's been no talk of him talking with any other team other than the Chargers.
I think the only other team that I heard rumblings around was Cleveland was still looking at possibly bringing him back.
Even after cutting him?
Yes. Possibly just bringing him back on a reduced salary. There was still a possibility there. But those are the only two. I mean, again, I see that as the less likely, obviously. And you said the only team really in reality that looked serious was the Chargers. But I don't know what's going to happen. This is kind of like, and again, this is why we're in the drolls of the NFL offseason, that I think that you get to after the first week of training camp, maybe week 2, you give your teams an opportunity to evaluate, okay, what do you got? Let's see if anything has improved. Where is this team at from where we were at in OTAs and minicamp to where we're at right now? What do we possibly need to improve this team? And then you go out and you can sign a free agent at that point. So who knows if that's what the Chargers' plan was all along. If they're making their evaluations between where they were at in OTAs and minicamp, and we're 10 days away from training camp as it stands right now. So who knows? But John Johnson's going to be playing for somebody for this team. I just can't see him not going into the season and week 1 and not being on the team.
I agree. We got about 15 minutes left on the live show today. At the jump, Jake, we talked about possibly talking about Kellen Moore, talk about Quentin Johnston impact. I think this is a good time to kind of just bring up kind of both at the same time and what the Chargers kind of, how it started, how it's going. For folks who did not see this, just digging on the screen here, offensive points per game. And I think this was probably the nail in the coffin for Joe Lombardi, at least for me. If it was me being Tom Telesco or Brandon Staley, and I was looking at one metric that was like, no, we can't have this. And this is why we're making a different move. And this is both different move away from Lombardi and to Kellen Moore, is looking at the offensive production per game with the stat that matters most. And that's points per game. If you split it, first half, second half, Chargers offense ranked 4th last year, 15.2, juggernaut. They were up there with the best in the NFL. Dallas, top 10, 13.1. And then you get to the second half. And this goes both directions and points to exactly why I would have made the move that they did. They went from 4th best in the NFL in the first half at scoring to 28th in the second half. When you have a quarterback like Justin Herbert and you have weapons like Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Gerald Everett, Austin Eckler, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the Cowboys went from 13.1, 9th in the NFL in the first half, to 13.8, number 1 in the NFL in the second half in scoring points. Can you imagine if you took that 13.8 and swapped out the 8.0, what that season would have looked like last year? Like,
Chargers definitely would have beaten the Jaguars. That's for damn sure.
They would have beat the Jaguars.
If that was
the
case.
Chiefs. They would have beat the Broncos. Like, they would have beat the Niners. Like, there's a lot of things that would have happened. Now, and
we're not talking about obviously defensive stats, but offensively, you definitely would have been more efficient.
You could score more points. That's kind of the point. But people say, oh, Justin Herbert was unhealthy and there were injuries.
She was, but
he was injured in the first half.
Yes. He doesn't just play in the second half.
So this is why I think you're going to see, this is why there is so much excitement for Kellen Moore, is because you heard rumblings that McCarthy didn't like, which boggles my mind, didn't like how Kellen Moore would continuously go for points and would try to put his foot on the throat, if you will, of opposing teams and wouldn't let up. I'm paraphrasing here, but basically didn't like to run up the score. As a Chargers fan, there is nothing I want more than to be able to sit back at the end of the third quarter, 31-10, and just watch the team 38-10, 41-10, 44-10. That sounds fantastic. When's the last time we saw that? I don't remember the last time. The last time I remember it somewhat was that Giants game where he threw that bomb to, I think it was Jalen Guyton, that ridiculous throw. The Chargers and Chargers fans just don't get that opportunity to like watch a team run it up.
You had the Giants game, and then you had the Rams game, which was your biggest margin of victory. So it's like you finally had to wait till the very end of the season to see something resemble that. But yeah, I don't understand that from McCarthy at all. And somebody was talking on ESPN earlier this week, and they said that McCarthy did a similar thing. I can't remember who the offensive coordinator was that they had parted with in Green Bay at the time, but I think it was his last 2 seasons in Green Bay, where they parted ways with the offensive coordinator, and then McCarthy took the reins, and the offense just did not produce the way that it was supposed to those final 2 years. And then McCarthy was subsequently let go. So who knows what's going to take place in that new system for Dallas, but that's an interesting way to phrase it. Your team is number 1 in scoring offensive points in the second half in the league. And you have a problem with that. Whatever. I just, hey, to each his own, man.
One man's trash is another man's treasure, right?
Sure.
At the end of the day, fitness says you have to score more points. Doesn't matter what quarter you do it in. And I agree. But then I also disagree. You got to score more points. Yes. Doesn't matter what quarter they're in. No, I think it does matter. Like, if I had to score more points in a half, I'd rather us suck in the first half, tremendous in the second half, because you don't win in the first half. You win in the second half. You win at the end of the games. And, I mean, obviously, I'd like to score more on both sides. But a lot of the best teams in the NFL, like the Eagles, the Chiefs, the Bills, they don't go 4th in the first half to 28th in the second. That's
too much of a deficit.
They'll be roughly in the top 10 on both sides.
And everything from that stats that you just showed, Dan, culminated in the Jacksonville playoff losses. The Chargers only were able to muster 3 points in the second half after scoring 27 in the first. What the hell?
Which, again, 24th. 28th after being 4th. Which, like, that stat in and of itself, like, and you talked about adjustments all year, how this Chargers team just felt like it lacked adjustments, especially on offense. Like, that stat, I think, just puts a bow on that. Because it's the same team that you're trotting out there first half, second half. So what changes? Honestly, what changes other than what the defense is doing or what the opposing team is doing? Again, that's the conversation I would have had as Tom Telesco, Brandon Staley with Joe Lombardi. As uncomfortable that would have been, explain to me how you go from 4th to 28th. It make sense. And there's no way you can, unless the fingers point back at you. Fitness says, I think Staley sticks to much of what works and doesn't make halftime adjustments. I think you can argue that for sure. And you saw some glimpses of that on defense where opposing offenses kind of seem to figure it out. I do think you talked about Derek Ansley earlier in the show. I think this is going to be where you'll see a Ronaldo Hill change to Derek Ansley benefiting this team. You've already seen mic'd up with DA, like, great dude. And the energy he brings is palpable. And I think he connects more with his defense. And I think the guys rally around him more. No slight to Ronaldo Hill. Guys loved him. But in terms of getting the most out of their players, I think you need energy. I think you have to adapt. And so I think you're going to see Derek Ansley kind of in the ear of the players and Coach Staley more, to be honest. Joseph has a request for Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt, the player, I'm down for. Sure. And I've asked for it. Kareem Hunt off the field, I don't see this Chargers organization going that direction. I just don't see it.
And you're talking about regardless of the fact that he has, been okay the last several years after that incident. That's what you're saying. Regardless of that, you don't see that as a move that the Chargers will take.
Correct. Yeah, I think the Chargers organization, for the most part, is like very high character. When's the last time you saw the Chargers go after a guy that has had that type of blemish on their record?
Yeah.
They just don't. And Lee Shaw, I think I'm pronouncing that right, agrees with me. We'll never sign Hunt. Too much baggage. Jake, we're on the last few minutes here of the live show. We've gone through a ton of topics here. 5 minutes left, guys, gals. If you have any last minute topics or questions, we can go rapid fire here for the last 5 minutes. Jake, I'll give you the floor first. Anything we missed? Anything we must discuss?
I'm shocked that we have gone basically 55 minutes and we have not said Quentin Johnston's name once on this live show.
Thank you.
Wow.
You just did, so we're
Well,
good.
yeah, there it is. So
Okay,
check.
bye.
That'll wrap it up now.
So, Quentin Johnston, Jake. How do you see Quentin Johnston impacting this team actually?
You try not to get too excited for a rookie wide receiver.
I saw that grin on your face.
You try not to get too excited. And, rookie wide receivers are kind of hit and miss. And you'll see one, maybe two out of a certain draft class that'll come out and perform. And sometimes it's not even the guys that you would expect to do it on the years that they're drafted. Quentin Johnston with Justin Herbert slinging him the ball and everything that we have seen thus far in OTAs and minicamp has got me very, very excited. It wants me to kind of harken back to the days when it was Keenan Allen, Tyrell Williams, and Mike Williams on this team, where you go big on the outside. And Dan, just let's not forget the numbers that Quentin Johnston was able to put up in the league with Max Duggan throwing him the ball at TCU. 60 receptions. 60. So however you want to extrapolate that, as far as whether that's if you want to look at that as a lack of production from him or the fact that Max Duggan wasn't throwing him the ball more. But even in that limited amount of stats or opportunities, still got 19 missed tackles and averaged 17.8 yards per reception. Can you imagine the type of volume and stats that he could put up, even as a wide receiver 3, and the potential that he could for a rookie playing alongside Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, and how many one-on-one opportunities he could possibly see? That's got me very excited.
And to think that you mentioned kind of the trio in the past with the trees, Tyrell Williams, Mike Williams, Vincent Jackson. He's much faster than those guys, than all of them. So if you can add like that speed, or what was the trio you said? It wasn't Vincent Jackson. Sorry, it was Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and Tyrell Williams.
Yes, the Williams brothers and Keenan Allen. Yeah.
Quentin Johnston, I think, is faster than all of them, and I don't think it's close. Even Tyrell Williams. So eye test, the things that I think you will see that Quentin Johnston will bring. I think you will see Quentin Johnston, and someone mentioned it here, fitness is going to open it up for other players. And if not, he's going to be open, which is insane to me. I think you will see the total yards after the catch for the wide receiving core go up. I think he'll be the biggest yards after the catch guy on the team. Period. I think you're going to see a lot more of those under routes be threats to go the distance. I vividly remember, I forget who they were playing, but there was the Mike Williams catch. I think it was against the Raiders week 18, 2 years ago. And again, he was gassed, but you saw him catch it in the middle of the field. Then he had one guy to beat to kind of break it to the end zone. Couldn't do it, ran out of bounds. If that's Quentin Johnston, that's a house call. I think you're going to see things that, and we talked about this last year, Jake, like the Chargers need game changers, game breakers, guys that can go to the house at any time. And last year, they just didn't have that. Even the Austin Eckler 70-plus yard touchdown, like guys were at his heels. Like that was close. And that was the one time you saw it. Otherwise, they had to methodically go down the field. You look at teams like the Dolphins, the Eagles, the Bills, like they make house calls like it's nobody's business. The Chargers have guys to do that now, and Quentin Johnston's one of those. So I think you'll see that. I'm excited for Quentin Johnston, man. I think he's the real deal. Lee Shaw, take 40 targets off of Eck and give him to Quentin Johnston, throwing to a different jet stream. Hey, that sounds like a good idea.
Familiar.
I like that. I like that. Let's see. I think I saw an over-under here for him. Quentin Johnston, as we get out of here. Quentin Johnston, at least 650 and 5 touchdowns. Over-under at 4.5 for Quentin Johnston. Jake, what are you taking?
I actually like this line. I think that's a fair line for him. And it's hard. We're talking about one football that's out on every single play. So who is it going to go to? Gerald Everett, Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Quentin Johnston. I haven't even named the rest of the guys.
Yep.
So I like this line. I think it's fair. because that's like right in the wheelhouse. That's probably something that I would say. I wasn't gonna say over 700 yards, but 5 touchdowns seems definitely possible. So it's kind of a twofer for me. I think that he can get the 5 touchdowns, maybe just not the yardage, and that's not from him not performing. That's just because the ball's going elsewhere.
there's one ball.
Right.
One ball. Everett comes in here, throwing a little shade. Another tall 4-5 guy. We'll see.
Hey, look, normally
this is not the same archetype.
Normally, I would agree with a situation like this. Like I was saying before, you try to not hype yourself up with rookie wide receivers, especially because it normally takes a little bit more time for them to hit the ground running. I just think in Kellen Moore's system, with the talent that is already established on this offense, this isn't like Quentin Johnston is coming in and he is automatically wide receiver 1 for this team, and you're expecting everything to go through him. I think the one-on-one opportunities for Quentin Johnston, as he showed in college, that's where he could take advantage of a number of different players. You add in the size and the speed element, and with the guys that he is playing around and in this offensive system, I think there is potential. But I get it. You don't want to get your hopes up too early for that. But still, there's a lot of reasons right now in July to be optimistic about it.
And also, let's just go worst case scenario that he is another tall 4-5 guy. We'll see. Oh, damn. We have another guy who's like Mike Williams, who's a top 5 wide receiver against man coverage. Oh, shucks. Like, people say that like it's a bad thing when Mike Williams and Keenan Allen are both possibly on the last year with this team. If you could replace a Mike Williams with a Mike Williams, which he's not the same player, but I'm just saying, if he was, why is that a bad thing? If you could add a Mike Williams plus Yak, yes, please. I'm sorry. It just seems crazy to me that people look at that as a negative, but who am I? I don't know. You got folks in here asking about Herbert signing before training camp. I don't know.
Look, we got 10 days to go before training camp. This was around the same type of scenario that Keenan Allen and Joey Bosa signed their extension, was right around this time. And as we know, Tom Telesco is very hush-hush behind closed doors when it comes to discussing contracts with the media. He will not say anything. Same with Brandon Staley. They will just give you the one-word answers to say, hey, things are progressing, it's ongoing, and that's the end of it. Next question.
Ongoing, progressing.
Yes. So we're probably not going to hear about this. We're going to wake up on a Wednesday morning and all of a sudden, breaking news, Justin Herbert has signed whatever contract for how many years and how many dollar signs behind it. And that'll be the end of it.
Justin Herbert will walk into training camp wearing like a Max Duggan jersey so he can avoid the cameras. He'll have a smirk on his face.
Right.
And then you'll hear 10 minutes later that he just signed his mega contract.
Yeah. The Chargers are so good at keeping the doors locked in terms of contracts goes that you don't even get to see like the Adam Schefter type of stories where it's like, hey, negotiations are progressing, that Justin Herbert is going to sign this. Like literally the deal will drop.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. I agree. Jake, I think that's going to do it. We had a ton of questions in here. I'm excited to kind of go back and listen to this after the fact as I do kind of the notes, because the number of topics we went through is, I think this might be a record.
Pretty good.
Shout out to the Bolt fam in the comments, giving us topics, questions.
This is how much we need football back, Dan. Okay. Everybody's sick of it. Everybody's ready for, I would assume that everybody, as far as Charger fans goes and the hype for training camp, hell, I'm excited for preseason. I don't even give a damn that these games don't matter. I'm just happy to have football back. Give me a break. Get me back to football, baby.
Yes, I agree. I'm ready. Let's end it on this one, Jake. Dude, Brad says, dude, how good is Vato going to be this year across from Mr. INT? Now, regardless of Mr. INT becomes Mr. INT, that's two separate conversations. Holy cow, I cannot believe he's actually going to be back. In theory, he should be back before the start of the season. That's insane. No one expected that. Mike Davis and Asante Samuel Jr. both were tremendous last year. If you can add JC Jackson, Mr. INT's version of JC Jackson to that.
Now, got to get back to that.
I don't know what's more exciting between Kellen Moore or the idea of that trio at cornerback, but they're not far off.
I like that. I like that response.
They're not far off. Like that trio, because again, people give shit to Brandon Staley, but like that's what he envisioned with his defense on the back end, and it just got taken out from under him with having that trio at DB. So yeah, excited for that. Jorge asks as we get out of here, Jake, when's the next live stream? Honestly, no idea.
Hell, I mean, this has been such a great turnout for this show. And obviously, Dan and I always love interacting with everybody in the chat room and taking questions and topics from you guys. We got 10 days before training camp. I'm down to do another one before training camp kicks off. I know we kind of teased what we're all excited about with 10 days out, but hell, Dan, I'm ready to do another one.
Yes, I am too. Joseph, shout out. Thanks for the feedback. Appreciate you guys. Lee Shaw asks, hopefully you all do a roundtable this year. State of the Union for the Chargers coming soon. I emoji, lightning bolt, Avengers assemble.
Interesting.
I think we might need to do something like that, Jake. I'm not sure. Guys, gals, thank you so much for tuning in to Charge the Leash. Honestly, live shows are the best. We love these. Jake, you got to end on this one.
Well,
Jorge comes in.
I will say this. We sit here on July 16th, 10 days away from training camp. Saying it's July is a hell of a lot better than saying it was June or it was May. So, yes, it's July, bro. I get it. But God damn it, we need football back.
Oh, man. All right. For Jake Hefner, Dan Wolkenstein, Chargers Unleashed, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If you have not done so already, please do us a favor. Subscribe, hit the like button, comment galore, share with your friends and family. We've got lots of giveaways and special guest episodes here coming up in a bit. Always appreciate you and your feedback and time chiming in. We'll talk to you next time on Chargers